Here's another story that was talked about on social media as well. A Ugandan lawyer who was only 6 weeks old when his family lost their land has now won it back. The legal dispute inspired him to study law and take on the case. It's taken him 23 years, but Rodney Jordan Kinyera was determined and he won the case, giving ownership of the land back to his family this week. Kinyera joins us now via Skype from Uganda. Rodney, very, very good. Good morning. Thank you so much for talking to us. Firstly, just take us back on when you were 6, when you lost the land itself. Tell us that story first.
Like you said, I was 6 years old at the time when my father lost the land. He had been living on the land for most of his life. Of course, he had worked out, out of our home area, but that's where he lived most of his life. So he had a lot of attachment to it. He had buried many of his relatives there. He had, he had plans for the land, So he got a certificate of title for that land. And when he went in to develop it and to do other things with it, he could not, because, many disputes arose. He was sued. He was taken to all these government offices. So it became a bit of a catastrophe for him and for the rest of the family.
Now, this land, was it your sole purpose to study law? Was it because you wanted the land back?
It inspired my decision greatly. I would say maybe 90%. When I was 6 years old, I didn't know how to help, but I wanted to help. It's only until I started going to court with him when I was maybe about 12, 13 that, I said, why should he suffer like this? He was lamenting all the time that he didn't have money for legal fees and things of the sort. So I made up my mind. I said, I will study law. I'll help him in whatever way I can, even if it's not this case. I didn't expect this case to last that long, to be honest. But I wanted to help him and help people in similar circumstances.
Mm-hmm. How did your father feel now when you managed 23 years later to say, listen, we've got the land back?
Well, it was bittersweet for him. He was on the one hand very happy. He was excited. First and foremost that he had got his land back. Secondly, that the investment that he had putting his child through school had paid off. But then on the other hand, time was lost. There was a lot of time lost, and that he cannot gain back. He's 82 now. He suffers with Alzheimer's, so we have to constantly keep reminding him that he got his land back and that it was his son who argued the case. But each time, his happiness, his joy is renewed, so that in itself is a blessing.
Yeah, it is a blessing. And maybe just to close this, just comment for us about how important land is, as an African.
Well, as an African, it's a sign of wealth. Across the divide. When I shared my victory with many people, I got reactions from across the continent, Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, and everyone is attached to their land. It's a sign of wealth, it's a sign of prestige, and also increasingly as Africa opens its boundaries to people from the outside, we discover resources beneath our land, and people have now attached more value to it because they can now monetize it, they can get really intrinsic value out of it. So, and it's not a resource that increases, so it's limited, and it only appreciates in value over time. So it's a very, very, very precious asset for us as Africans.
100%. Thank you so much. That Ugandan lawyer, Rodney Jordan Kinyera, who they lost their family land when he was just 6 years old. He became a lawyer, and 23 years later, he won the case to get his family land back.